Welcome to the Steve Insamino Says Boom Show issue number 82.
Bomb! Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel. Yes.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Steve and Niall show.
No Steve.
No Steve. Issue 82. Just so people know out there, Steve had to go back to his hometown for the where does he even live? South Africa, the Black Lagoon?
England.
Yeah, but he was originally
in London.
Yeah, but he was originally from South Africa.
Was he really?
I think so.
I thought he was stationed in South Africa.
He was created.
When he was in the Royal Defense Forces of Europe.
He was created somewhere. Who knows?
Yeah. They gave him the secret serum. That's why he's a massive giant.
Yeah, God. But Steve, we miss you, brother. So Steve will not be in this episode, and not even next episode that we have too, because he'll be away, but he'll be back soon enough. And
Yes.
And so whatever, Steve, we can make it without you. We don't need you. We don't need you. So Niall, tell us what's going on, brother.
All right, everyone. As you know, please look below, click that subscribe button, and smash the bell to get notifications when we go live like we are right now, when we upload some awesome new episodes. And frankly, John, I'm pretty excited tonight. What do we have brewing? What do we got?
We got an absolute survivor in the comic industry. Like, if there's anything to say, yes, he's a writer and editor. I don't even believe that. I believe that he's just this survivor because this guy has lasted through war, battles, skirmishes. I can't wait to hear why, because this guy has been working for Marvel for so long. He's just kind of that guy that was like, oh, yeah, Ralph is here. Yeah, he's there. Yeah, right. Yeah, and Ralph. He's the guy that probably always hid when they were like cutting jobs and all that stuff. But he hid away, and then he kind of just reemerged. He has a fascinating career that he's going to talk to us about. And I have to say this: every time I was telling people who's coming on, they're always saying to me, "You're getting the Karate Kid." You're getting the Karate Kid. So many people said that. I go, no, we're getting somebody better.
Like this guy right here.
Yeah.
No. He trained the Karate Kid.
No, he's definitely tough. Definitely a survivor. I mean,
And the
Roy turned me on to him, and I always wanted to talk to him because he has a fascinating career being an editor and a writer for Marvel. Like I said, he through so many decades and through so many different eras too of Marvel. Mm-hmm. So without any further ado, now I want to introduce this guy.
Yeah, so everyone, please welcome Mr. Ralph Macchio to the show. What's up, Ralph?
Hello, guys.
Welcome.
The Karate Kid.
And John, one thing you didn't know that I can reveal now in public for the first time, I was on Kamala Harris's short list for vice president.
Really?
I wasn't like a Midwest guy, so we sort of clashed a little bit there, and I was next
Dodge the bullet. You're okay.
Ralph, it is an extreme honor. Thank you for coming on the show. I want to shed light on you because, first off, before we get into your career and all that stuff and your history, I saw you at Heroes. When was the last time you were at a show, Ralph? Have you just started it up?
Yes, this is really the first year that
Yeah.
I have gone to conventions, and I have to blame that on my good buddy and former editor-in-chief, Tom DeFalco, because Tom was
Oh.
telling me, Tom and I are buddies, and he would call me and he goes, you're hanging around the house, you're still doing your work for Marvel, and right now I'm writing a long introductory piece for the second Mark Rummel Captain America omnibus. That's taking my time up right now. But he goes, if you just went to a few of these conventions, people, he goes, would like to meet you. He goes, they'd like to get an autograph from you. And we have panels that you could be on. He goes, believe me, it's wonderful. So I took him up on it, and I went to 2 or 3 this year so far. And the one, of course, that I met you at, John, was fantastic. Roy was there. Steve Englehart, was next to me. DeFalco was there. A whole bunch of other people I knew. So, and the next one I'm going to go to is the Terrific Con in Connecticut. I'm driving up there with my brother and nephew. So that'll be fun. So that's how I got started on this. It's only really been the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like I said, I've been around the circuit so many times, and I never saw you. But I will tell you this: in all my years of doing this, the 2 best people that Roy introduced me to that I truly have an affinity for, one is I love Rick Hoberg, and Tom DeFalco. I mean, such a good guy. And he's been on the show a few times. I've done so many conventions with him, but talking to Tom and finding out why he's such a good guy. I mean, I'm sure you know this too, and I always have to mention this, but this is it's so perfect for his personality. Before he got into the comic business, he went to clown school, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
When he told me that, I said, perfect. I could not believe that, because he's such a genuinely good person, and he's just so, like, there's a warmth about him too. Like, I always jump on him too, like a big bear. He's like a big bear. He's such a lovable guy. But when I found out he was going to clown school, I said, I can't act it. It's so perfect. It's so perfect and all that. But anyways, enough about Tom. Tom has his own accolades and all that stuff.
He got me into this whole thing. And when I'll tell you one thing about Tom, though, before we get off the subject, is when Tom was going to be brought on as editor-in-chief. At that time, of course, Marvel, we were in a very tense mood. Things have been tough for the last year or two.
Yeah.
Tom came in. We had a big meeting. And you could have cut the tension with a knife, because Mike Hobson was introducing Tom as the editor-in-chief, and he was kind of sitting there like this, and the staff was over here, and everything was very tense. So I said, I rarely speak up at these things, but this time I had to break the tension. So I raised my hand, and Mike Hobson goes, Ralph, what is it? I said, Mike, I thought after all we've been through, we were going to get somebody good this time. Little by little, the chuckle started, this and that, and then it became kind of a roar. Everybody was clapping, and after that, it broke the tension. And Tom said he's been eternally grateful to me for that.
So that predicates on your career, because you've been through so many things. So let's talk about little Ralph. First, getting into the comic business. Before that, did you start reading? Were you reading comics at a young age and stuff?
Yes, and actually, because I am a child of the 50s, I'm aging myself, there were no Marvel comics at that time. I was going to camp at a nearby town. It was a day camp, and all the kids up there had in their cubby holes, they had, because there were no Marvel comics, they had all the DC books. They had the Julie Schwartz Justice League, Green Lanterns and Flashes. They had the Mort Weisinger Superman books and all. And I began to see them all pull these out. And when we would break for lunch or whatever it is, they'd read them, and I talked to them, and they said, here. And I actually got hooked on them, the DC books. This was around, again, 57, 58. I was just a young kid. And then after that, I started to collect them. And then, of course, Marvel came in the early 60s, just at the right time as I was beginning to get into my teen years. I could graduate from the Mort Weisinger kind of more fantasy-oriented for 10-year-old kind of books into the Marvel material, which was, now for the more younger teens and all that, beginning anyway. So that's really how it started. I saw kids with these comics at the camp, and I said, what is these? And I'd read the Jimmy Olsens and I'd read the Supermans. And they were charming. When you were that young, 10 years old or so, they worked perfectly. But I was able to then graduate right into the Marvel stuff, and I never looked back.
Okay, but did you want to get a work in comics at that time?
No, I honestly, I have to say, I wish I could tell you and make up a fib that it was always my lifelong dream to work for Marvel. No, I had gone to college. I was in graduate school in the mid 70s, and I was going to be getting my master's degree in English literature, and hopefully I was going to get a job teaching. I also had all of my credits towards my doctoral degree in English, and I was pursuing that too. And then I'd gone to a convention in 1975. It was really the only convention I was going to. I heard about it because I was not in fanland. I wrote letters to the comics, but I did not participate in any fan events. I didn't have any contacts or anything like that. But I'd heard Jack Kirby was going to be at this convention in 1975. So I went there. I got his autograph on a couple of Thor comics, walked around and all. It was a brand new experience for me. And then as I was walking out, it's kind of one of these things where your life could go this way or that way. I was right at the door, and I heard somebody mention the Black Panther, and I turned to the left, and there was a table there with a writer behind it, and he was signing copies of the Black Panther. And that happened to be that and Killraven were two of my favorite books. And Don McGregor was one of my favorite writers at that time at Marvel. I went over there, I mentioned my name to him, and I happened to have a Killraven comic or Black Panther book, and he goes, "Hey, man, I know you. You wrote all those letters to the Panther and Killraven." He goes, "Hang on for a minute. I'll take you back into the convention." So I said, okay. I was just going to leave. I was going to get my car and drive home. Takes me back into the convention, and we met Howard Chaykin. I guess they were friendly. They were talking about different things. And then he said, "Would you like a tour of Marvel?" I go, "Okay, I'm not doing anything." Marvel. And when we went up to the company, this was, I think they were at 575 Madison at that time. And again, this is going back to 1975.
Right.
He was showing me the offices, and we ran into Chris Claremont. And I had also written a lot of letters, both to X-Men, but more to Iron Fist. I really liked Iron Fist a lot. And Chris goes, "I know you. You're the guy who wrote all those letters to me." He goes, "You know something? You can write." He goes, "Would you like to interview Roy Thomas for Foom and write an article on Conan?" I go, "Sure, why not?" I was going, as I said, I had no intention of working for the company or doing anything like that. I was going to go back to my studies, my graduate studies and all.
Oh my God.
Things sort of just fell in line within the space of 3 or 4 hours. So I said, "Sure." So he goes, "Here's what you're going to do." He goes, "Roy is trying to decide whether he's going to come back as editor-in-chief or if he's going to go out to the coast and seek fame and fortune out there."
Right.
So what we need you to do is come up every Friday and try to get him to sit down and interview him. And then you can write the article on Conan. So for the next month, I kept coming up on Fridays, but Roy was too busy to be interviewed. He'd kind of go, "I'd love to talk to you, but I got other things to do." So I lived in northern New Jersey, where I still live, so it was an easy commute. And I said, while I'm here hanging out, I'll just chat with people. And I became friends with all the people that were up there at Marvel at that time. I think it was Marv and Len and Steve Gerber, Steve Englehart, Doug Mensch would come in, and Don McGregor, of course. They were all kind of working on staff. And the big thing at that time was you didn't want to do a career as a staffer. You only stayed on staff in an editorial capacity long enough to get enough books to write and leave staff. What happened was I kept coming up, and finally I did get to interview Roy. And I had made, friends with Archie Goodwin, with John Warner, who was editor of the Black and White line. And then they said, well, Marv Wolfman is leaving. This was after I'd done the interview, and I was still coming up to hang out with everybody. And John Warner was made editor of the Black and White line. And he said, "Hey, Ralph," he goes, "would you like to become my assistant?" So once again, I said, "Yeah, sure." I could still pursue my graduate studies in English, but at that time, it didn't look good as for getting a teaching job. So I said, "You know what? While I'm pursuing graduate studies and seeing how things go there, I might as well take this job up in Marvel." And so in 1976, in April of 76, I took a job as his assistant, and I was the assistant editor on Planet of the Apes, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, Doc Savage, Rampaging Hulk, and I loved it, and I never looked back. And we had a great time. And then John left. They hired someone else, Roger Slifer, to be the editor of the Black and White line. Eventually, I moved over to the Color Comics, and I also became Roy's East Coast liaison when we were putting out the Savage Sword of Conan book. Roy would call me up on the day the book was to leave, the proofreading, all the corrections he wanted to be done. I would do as much, as quickly as I possibly could. Check out the book, talk to everybody that was involved with it, and then we would send the book out. And I also worked with him and Howard Chaykin on the Star Wars comic.
Wow.
The first Star Wars book, which, according to Jim Shooter, was actually the book that saved Marvel.
Yeah.
I heard that story. I have no reason to doubt it or to believe it. I'm not sure one way or the other, but apparently it made so much money that it put Marvel, in the black. So that was really the beginning of my career up there. And I just see that the difference between me and the other people that were working at Marvel, because you asked about my career and why I lasted so long and all that. I never, when I got on staff, I realized how much I liked working with people. And I realized that I liked working in an editorial capacity. I liked being involved in all aspects of the comic. I was given an opportunity to write some comics. Roger Stern asked me to write some issues of 2-in-1 and things like that. But I didn't want to get like 3 or 4 comics and leave staff, because to me, writing was a very solitary occupation. And I didn't like that. I didn't want to sit alone in a room, think up stories, and type them up. I like coming into an office every day. I had an easy commute from New Jersey. I could drive into the city or take a bus, and I could sit there and work all day and go home. It was a 9-to-5 job that I loved. And that's why I never left the staff, because I like the idea of working on the books with people. And people have asked me, well, you survived all those regimes. How is it that so many people were let go and you weren't? And my stock answer, which I have to say I actually believe, is you would have to ask the people who didn't fire me, because I don't know.
Right.
I stayed there, kept my head down, did my job, and I guess the people that were in charge thought I was valuable enough to stay on until in 2011 I decided, after 35 years, I'll maintain my connection with the company, but I've done my staff work, I think, long enough. So that's the history, John.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, Ralph. It's like you survived all these regimes, and like I almost think that like you should be teaching like covert op to people in the military, because
visible.
Well, but because of the shark infested waters of that business, I mean, like everybody got caught up into the chopping block. Like at one time of the year, even Roy, when he went to DC, and then like Shooter, or that regime, and then DeFalco. I mean, but there was so many changes, and there was always people like the turnaround rate on that was like a fast food joint. But people were trying to do it, but and then there's little Ralph Macchio, he's like still there. All of a sudden,
they couldn't step on me and get me. I would crawl into the corner and they couldn't get me.
Because it was funny when I remember. You always see your name in the comics and all that stuff, and I remember seeing like it was like a documentary or a special, and it was like you were speaking on it, and I remember going, he's still working there? Like, he was so under the radar. And I was like, I thought like, maybe they got you to come to do it, but you were still working for Marvel. And I was just like, wait, I remember him. I go, I can't believe he's still there. It's so funny how under the radar you are. You have like hands on everything, but yet you're still like covert op, like you're still like in the shadows.
Was he under the radar, or was he just really good at his job?
No,
there were a lot of people that Nala were good at their job, but unfortunately they were let go. I just somehow was able to sort of be, ninja-like, and I was able to sort of survive and thrive. And well, for example, when Bob Harris was made editor-in-chief,
yeah,
that was when they had, I think it was called Marvelcution, and they actually let a good portion of the staff.
Correct.
Now, I think I can speak to why I survived that, because Bob was my first assistant. I kind of brought him. He was basically a gopher, working right under Jim Shooter at just making Xeroxes of things. But he would come into my office and bring me Xeroxes of things, and we would talk about comics. And I said, this guy is very sharp. He knows what he's talking about. So when I finally got promoted, and by the way, I was an assistant for 7 years, which I think I set the record for being an assistant, because I never
a lot of records, Ralph.
Yeah, I was comfortable as an assistant because if Jim came in or Archie, whatever it is, I could always go, he's the guy you want to yell at, not me. I'm just the assistant. When I finally got promoted, I picked Bob as my first assistant. And I think I tutored him and I brought him along, and he was a very sharp guy. I mean, look, he was editor-in-chief at both companies, DC and Marvel. And so when he got promoted and they let a lot of people go, I think he felt that, Ralph is somebody that I can rely on. He was my boss for a while. He's got my back. And so that's why he kept me on. Now, later, when the next regime came in, when Joe Quesada came in, Joe, I had sort of done a favor for Joe at one point because he wanted to do, he called me up one time, and I really didn't know him, and he wanted to do a Daredevil. He says, Ralph, I got to do a Daredevil. It's just eating me up. So I brought him up, and I kind of helped him to get a Daredevil story. He never forgot that because he said he talked to other people, and they said, yeah, all right, goodbye. But I wasn't like that. I knew he was a freelancer and he wanted to do something, and he loved Daredevil and all. So I tried to give him that opportunity. And then when he came on as EIC, I think he felt that I had, the chops to do various things. For example, when Joe took over, for the first couple of years, he had me read all of the plots. This was something that I did in addition to my normal editorial work. I would take home a stack of plots like this from every office because he wanted me to comment and critique them, send that back to the editor of the office, copy him on it, and send a copy of it to him because he felt at the time that the stories were really lagging at Marvel, and he kind of admired what I had done on my books. He always felt that the strength of my books were with the stories, and I felt that as a story editor, probably that was my greatest strength. Joe seemed to recognize that, and he said, Ralph, I want you to read all these things. So it's a lot of extra work, but it paid off because we got the editors kind of, back on track with the stories. And Joe was a great editor-in-chief. And of course, Bill Jemis, when he came in, he also felt that I was a guy who had been there a long time, and that when he started up the Ultimate line, he and Joe, and I remember Joe mentioning at one point, Joe said, I gave you Brian Bendis because I wanted to put our most seasoned editor with a guy who was basically known for independent comics work. He goes, I thought the mixture would be interesting. So we bonded right away on Ultimate Spider-Man. And then, of course, I got the other Ultimate books. And Bill Janis and Joe were very happy, and those books took off. So I think that's how I came through on those regimes. Somebody had recognized that I had some sort of value to the company, and that was it. So that's why I think I still maintain my time.
Ralph, you remind me of Michael Jackson in the Billie Jean video. Everything he steps on, the light turns up. Like every step he takes, it seemed to be every step you take. It just happened to be the right thing, and it lit up.
I know, right?
I got
incredible.
Very lucky. When Bob Harris was editor-in-chief, when he came in, the Spider-Man books were in trouble because the Clone Saga now was beginning to drag them down. You guys probably remember after a certain period of time, the Clone Saga, the word clone in Spider-Man became poison. Right. Bob called me in the office and he said, Ralph, I'm giving you the Spider-Man books. Now, a little secret about me, I never wanted the top line books to edit because you were always under the spotlight. I like the idea of having secondary books, things like Moon Knight, characters like that, because you could play around with them and nobody noticed. You could do
yeah.
But with Spider-Man, hey, that was the corporate, symbol of the company there. So when he gave them to me, he goes, we have got to get these books back on track. Spider-Man is our top guy. And we sat and we had a long meeting and we decided we got to get rid of the baby. We've got to show that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, not Ben Reilly, even though supposedly they'd done the DNA test and all. And he gave me a list of things. And what we sat there and we were kind of stumped at was who could be the mastermind behind the whole thing. And at the same time, we popped up with there's only one guy, Norman Osborn. we knew that was going to be chancy because we knew that Norman is already dead 20 years. Had to find a way to bring him back, make him the mastermind behind everything that had gone on in Peter Parker's life. And we were very lucky because I was working with a great group of writers there, Tom DeFalco and Mark Madison and the other guys. They were all fantastic. We managed to pull it off and get those books back on track and end the Clone Saga in what I felt was a very satisfactory manner, and then get those books back to where they should be.
Wow. That was pretty cool. Let me ask you this though, Ralph. Did you have any other close calls where like you were going to be like, I might not be here tomorrow? Any of those ever happen?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was always when they had the Marvel Cution thing. This was really scary. You knew that if during that day when you were going to be called into the editor-in-chief's office, if your phone rang, you were being called down to his office to be let go.
Oh, wow.
Everybody sat there in the office that day and wondered whether or not their phone was going to ring. I didn't know if my phone was going to ring.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't. And I got very lucky, and I was able to leave the staff at Marvel in 2011 under my own steam. Mm-hmm. And Marvel was very gracious about it. You know, we left on very good terms. I said, look, I've done my 35 years here. I said, I want to continue to work with Marvel always. I've actually continued to do consulting editing for them. I worked with Nick Lowe on some of the Spider-Man. When they brought Ben Reilly back, Nick brought me on as a consulting editor. And I remember telling him, you know, Nick, 20 years ago, we got rid of Ben Reilly in a manner I thought nobody could bring him back. We made him into particles of dust that floated away. I said, now you guys are bringing him back. But if you want me to work with you on this a little bit, I'd be happy to. And then when they brought the Conan books back, when Marvel recently, I guess a few years ago, had gotten the Conan license, they asked me to come in as a consulting editor working with Mark Basso. And I had a great time. Of course, Marvel, I guess, gave up the license or whatever. But during that time, I was working as a consulting editor. And I continued to write comics and all that. So I've maintained a strong relationship with Marvel. But after 35 years on staff, I was going in 2011, you know, I think this is enough. I've been commuting every day for, 35 years. Let me hang out with the family and friends and just, experience a little more of life now.
That is so wild.
We got an apology comment in here for you, Ralph, in the live chat. So this is from Jason Moore. Ralph, I was the anchor on Spider-Man Osborn Journal over penciler Kyle Holtz, and I screwed up my deadline. Just wanted to apologize to you again after 25 years or more for messing that up.
No apologies necessary, Kelly. No apology. Anybody that worked on that stuff, we understood. If you were late, we got through it. So it was really nice of him to say it, but no apologies needed.
Ralph, what I have to say, though, the best part of this whole story is you actually beat Marvel and you left on your own terms. That's like, you kind of like got the dust off and they're like, Ralph, I'm out of here, guys. I'm out of here. Thanks for the shit.
And then they went downhill after that.
I know. It's so.
I got to tell you, mention that now. I have to say, people were saying, I remember John Byrne at one point had said, I guess he was on social media or something like that. He said, well, now with Ralph's departure, the old Marvel has gone on. And I said, wait a minute, guys. There isn't even going to be a blip. I said, Marvel is a smoothly running, well-oiled machine. People are interchangeable. As much as I'd like to think I have value for the company, there are some great young editors that are going to fill my shoes, and they're going to do a fabulous job on all the books. I said, so thank you very much. But believe me, Marvel is going to go on and do just fine. And they did. So I thought that was, it was very nice of people to say that, but I didn't want them to say, hey, come on, let's put this guy on a pedestal. No, I did what I could for the company. My best job for that company was to be a story editor on the books. I felt that was my strength, and that's what I stuck with. But when I was gone, they had plenty of good people, and they continue to have good people who work on staff.
Yeah, wow, it's incredible when you think about it, though. Like, I mean, you kind of knew your place, and you stayed there, and you like stayed in that. Like, you didn't go too far out there, or like maybe pull. Like I said, like with shark-infested waters, you kind of stayed near the shore. And while all these sharks and all these other guys are getting eaten alive, you're kind of sitting back there with the cocktail saying, I see that. I see that.
You
That's
just
that's
doing my
incredible.
thing, doing what I could do best. And what you say, John, is very true because I could have pushed myself a little bit more into the administrative end of
Yeah.
it, to try to rise up and say, hey, maybe I can become a vice president and all that. But I said, I would think to myself when I have private conversations with myself and going, Ralph, your real value to this company is as a comic book editor, as a story editor. Your strength is you have kind of an ability to get people excited when they're working with you on a comic. They seem to be their best. And I said, that's where I feel the most satisfaction when I put out a good comic. Now, I had the opportunity to do some writing along the way too. And I felt, good about that. But it was never the satisfaction that I got from sitting there and editing a comic.
Yeah.
And the satisfaction I most got was when I would edit a book after, say, a superstar had left that book, and people would be thinking, uh-oh, so-and-so left, now it's going to go down the tube. Well, I would have a pep talk with the new team coming on.
Yeah.
I say, you know what? Everybody's expecting us to fail because we're not so-and-so. We're not going to let that happen. And I kind of got in there like the coach, and I said, we're not going to lose any sales on this book because you guys are going to knock it out of the park. And I have to say, that's where I got my greatest satisfaction, where we would go into a meeting and they would be discussing sales, and they go, sales on Thor and this and that, they didn't drop after so-and-so left. Thanks, nice job. And that was where I got the most, that's where I felt a real quiet sense of pride.
I would feel so good. You're the guy in the platoon everybody wanted to kind of gravitate to. Let's go with Ralph because you had the lucky charm. They didn't want to die in the helicopter. It's just like I want to stick with Ralph. I want to just go.
They called my office the bubble. When you came into the bubble, you were sort of safe. And other places you weren't, but people did. They would say, "Okay, we're going into Ralph, so we're going into the bubble now." So that was okay.
Well, before I give it to Niall, Ralph, you were saying how you like to edit, but who was a character that you like to write? What was one of the characters that you really gotta, I know you said secondary characters, but there had to be one character that you gravitated to.
When it came to writing, I would say I loved writing Thor because I loved that world. Now, Mark Grunwald and I, we worked with Roy. We were sort of his East Coast liaisons on Thor for a period of time, when he had taken the book over again. And Roy did a fabulous job when he came back on Thor. And he did the Red Norville thing, and he did the Eternals and Celestials.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And he left just before 300. And I really just loved the mythology of Thor. I loved everything that Lee and Kirby had created and all the things that have been added since then. And so when I had the chance to write Thor, I think I wrote 299 or 298. Mark wrote 299. And then Roy was gone. And we had put together 300. And I said, boy, we really got to do something with this because people are expecting. I mean, we got to end the Ring and the Nibelung saga.
Right.
We got to figure out what we're going to do with all of this, Celestials versus Thor and what's going to happen. And we did our very best on that. And I kept adding pages because when we realized how big the story was getting, I talked to Mark and I said, you know what? I'm going to contact Keith Pollard, and we're not going to tell our editor. I think it was Jim Salicrup at that time. I don't remember. And we're just going to tell him to keep adding pages because I said, if we really want this to be spectacular, I mean, I had visuals in my head of Thor throwing his hammer at Arishem and trying to knock him over, and Arishem bringing his hand down on him. I said, we can't do this with the space that we've got. We've got to add pages. So we did. We added 6 or 7 extra pages so we could do a double spread with Celestials, with Odin inside the Destroyer armor, holding the Odin sword and all. And luckily that issue came out very well. In fact, at the beginning of the program, you guys had a shot of the cover for 300.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's our background too.
We stayed up for a while, and I just loved writing Thor. I loved editing Thor as well. It was just a great experience. Wow. I love the mythology of it.
Wow. Go ahead now.
Yeah, so I mean, we've touched base. I mean, you did your 9-to-5 job, 35 years at Marvel, but it got you out of the office too, because while you were still at Marvel, the cinematic universe started developing, and from what we know and love, and you were able to spend time out there. Can you tell us a bit about what it was like, working with Favreau and stuff?
Absolutely. Joe Quesada, when Marvel Studios really had been formed and all that, they really had wanted, they did something very smart. They said, where a lot of these things that had been done in the past hadn't worked was because the people who were producing these things looked down on the source material. Well, Jon Favreau had a different idea. He wanted to revel in the source material.
Right.
And so Joe Quesada brought us out there. We went out to the coast and we sat down with John for like a week or so. And he had a yellow legal pad, very smart guy. And at that time, they hadn't cast Robert Downey Jr. yet, or Gwyneth Paltrow, or anyone in the movie. Jon Favreau was actually Robert Downey Jr.'s champion because the studio was very iffy on him because of the background. We all know.
Yeah, he was at a low point in his career at that time.
You hit it right on the head, yes. But he was his champion, and he thought he'd be perfect for Tony Stark. At one point they were considering a number of other people to play Tony Stark. What's his name from the Mission Impossible movies? Tom Cruise.
Oh, Tom Cruise.
Like the first guy that they were thinking of. He might have done a nice job, but it wouldn't have been the same thing. So anyway, we were out there and we sat with him for a week. He asked us about what we thought about the character of Tony Stark and Iron Man. And he really wanted to know. He really wanted to be faithful to the source material. And as I mentioned earlier to Niall, at one point, he asked us, he kind of went around the room. There were 5 or 6 of us there. And he said, I want you in one line to tell me who Tony Stark is. Oh. And we didn't have much time to think about it. He really wanted us to just give it to him off the top of our heads. When he came to me, I said, Tony Stark is a man who has everything, but he's a man who has nothing. Because he was a man who had all the wealth. From the outside, he's the guy everybody would admire, and every guy would want to be him because he got all the girls. But inside, he was empty, and he also had the heart thing.
Yeah,
he had all this stuff. So he also had nothing because there was an emptiness to him too. And so that's why I said he's a man who had everything and a man who had nothing. And they used that line in the movie when he was in the cave, and then there was a guy there talking to him. And he said to the guy, actually, Tony Stark didn't say it. The guy who was in there said that to him. And I remember just perking up in my chair, watching it going, hey, I came up with that line. That's really cool. And I also pushed very much for Gwyneth Paltrow to be, I was a big Gwyneth Paltrow fan, and I still am. And I kept, I sort of whispered in his ear, she'd be perfect as Pepper Potts. Every day, she should be perfect as Pepper Potts. So I don't know if I had anything to do with it. He may have already had that in his head. But it was great to see her as Pepper Potts as well. So, and that started the whole thing off. That was, although you got to give credit to Wesley Snipes because before Iron Man there was Blade.
Oh, absolutely,
of course,
absolutely. You're like the golden child, Ralph. Like I swear to God, it's like the golden child. I mean, seriously, think about that. Like, and you do it it's so nonchalant with you, with no ego, no anything. I'm just saying, like, you just kind of just say these things, and all of a sudden, like, you're like everywhere. There's like, you're like a little bit of the pepper or like the spice on like this huge thing. And it's just like, yeah, that's that guy. That's this guy. Like, that's incredible though.
Well, John, I speaking about being everywhere. Again, we also in the early days, we did have a lot of contact with the studio, with Kevin Feige. And I remember we would read the scripts at that point, and we would comment on them, and we would send them back. They'd send them in by pouch, and I was one of the people who would read the early Marvel Cinematic Universe scripts. And at one point, I got a good relationship with Kevin Feige, and I remember contacting him at one point saying, Kevin, I come from a big Italian family, and I'm always telling them, I had something to do with this Marvel movie and all. And they go, well, we don't see your name anywhere. What do you do? So I called Kevin, and I mentioned that to him, and he says, Ralph, he goes, I'll tell you what. We're going to fly you out here with Walt Simonson and Louise Simonson, and we're going to put you in the Thor movie. And so I actually had a little scene in the Thor movie. I was at the end of the movie. I was in the banquet scene after all the activity and action had been done. And I was at the end of the table. And we were there for a couple of days actually filming that scene. And I got a chance to meet Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth and hang out with those guys and to actually be on the set with Kenneth Branagh and watch them film that stuff, because we were there for like a week or two. And it was fantastic. It was like the experience of a lifetime just to be there and to see how this thing got filmed and then to actually be in a scene. Just incredible.
So your appearances at the buffet, like I mean at the banquet with I see
Yeah.
Simonson and stuff.
And
Now,
Walt,
see if you can find him. See if you can find Ralph
Let me see if I
online.
can find that image.
See, Ralph, this is another thing. Like, once again, of course you're in there, but I never knew. Like, it's one of those things. You're like everywhere.
but John, you know, I do have to say something else. I really don't have an ego. I
No.
always put the books first. I am not a guy who ever worked on a comic or anything like that and said, this is about me. I always said I like being in the background because this is all about everything but me. Anything that I can do to make a comic that I edit or write better, that's my satisfaction. I never wanted to be one of those guys that said, well, you know what I did? I did this and I did that. I have no interest in that. And I don't have an ego in that regard ever. I'm satisfied with the work that I've done and with my career at Marvel. I feel I gave my best to the company, but it was never, ever about me. It was always about the material.
Wow. And it's funny, like I said, because you got some writers and some artists, they put their heart and soul into it, so they're a little more emotional and all that stuff. You were still able to sit back and like not let your emotions take over and kind of do the whole thing. I mean, that says a lot. I mean, it truly is. You truly are. It's like you are an anomaly. Like there's something that you did. I mean, it's a great. Are you ever going to write an autobiography? How to survive? Like
People have asked me, when are you going to write your book on Marvel? First of all, I don't have the discipline to write a book. That's number one. But number two, if you look at the introductions that I've done for the Masterworks, for the omnibuses, for Marvel Tales, that is my book on Marvel.
oh,
I write an intro when I get the opportunity to talk about the characters or that time period, and I've been very blessed because they've come to me frequently to write these introductions for things. Again, I wrote just recently. Right now, I'm writing the introduction. It's a long one for the second Mark Gruenwald Captain America omnibus, and I was asked by Brian Overton, who oversees them, to write the first one too. And he said, Ralph, there's no one else that knew Mark and that worked with Mark as closely as you did.
right.
You're the guy who could do this. And so it has worked in my favor having that sort of lineage and history at Marvel, because
Yes.
when they want to talk about ROM or one of those, other things that you worked in the microdose, it goes back maybe 30 years. But I worked on all that stuff, and I have memories of the people I worked with and what it was like at that time at Marvel. So that's my book. If you want to know my book at Marvel, read all those introductions.
Yeah. I found one image, but it's not. It's looks like were you guys dressed?
There it is. Yes, that's me as dressed up as an Asgardian diplomat with Walt and Louise.
Right.
All at that table.
Right. But that's before the scene was being filmed.
Yeah, I
correct?
can't find the scene image. The only ones online seem to show, Walt.
Right, but that's cool. And I have to tell you, Kevin Feige, this guy was so on the ball. Not 10 minutes after I got off the phone with him, and he said, Ralph, we're gonna put you, you and Walt and Louise are gonna come out because of all, what Walt had to do with Thor and all that, which was incredible. 10 minutes later, I got a call from the costume department at the studio out on the coast, and they said, Mr. Macchio, can you tell us your shoulder size? And I said, I really don't know. I said, I'm about 5'8", and I weigh about 135 pounds and all. And I said, that's all I can tell you. So, but they were right on the money with getting me a costume, to be an Asgardian diplomat. So that's how on the ball they were. And it was a fabulous time we had. One thing I'll relay to you, this is how smart Kenneth Branagh was. And we all know him as a great Shakespearean actor and director. I saw him at one point. He was alone on the set. This was after they'd done the scene where they were all walking along and there'd been a great snowstorm or anything. And he was walking back and forth. And I saw him gesturing and all. And I was standing on the side. Nobody else was in there. And I was watching this. And I went up to him and I said, Mr. Branagh, I said, can you tell me what you're doing here? Are you preparing for another scene? And he said, Ralph, he goes, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to unsettle the audience. He goes, because you see in the West, we do things from left to right. He goes, and people kind of expect things to go from left to right. Well, I'm going to set this scene up so everything you think would be going from left to right, I'm going to have it go from right to left because it's going to unsettle the audience and it's going to make them pay more attention to the scene than they normally would. That's how smart this guy was. And he was doing this all alone. No other actors were on the set. I just happened to be hanging out on the side there, and I'm watching this guy, and I said, I've got to talk to him. And he was so gracious. I said to Mr. Bronner, the fact that you're someone of your caliber is directing a Marvel Comics movie. I said, what can I say? I said, we're all in awe of it. And he put his arm on my shoulder and he says, well, Ralph, if you hadn't edited and written all of those Thor comics, he goes, we wouldn't be here doing this. I said, I was just so taken with that. It was such a nice compliment, far more than I deserved, because compared to the work that other people had done on Thor, mine was minimal. But it was so nice of him to say something like that. A real gem. Everybody on that set was fantastic. They were all fun to be with. Tom Hiddleston, I remember at one point after a scene was over, I was again standing on the side. He picked up the hammer and he goes, look, Ralph, Loki is nice, finally worthy. He put it down and walked away. And Anthony Hopkins, the first time I met him, I was standing there with Walt, and he came out of an elevator because there are several floors in the studio, and he was dressed up in full Odin regalia. And he had like the 8-inch, heels on his shoes to make him even bigger.
Right.
He walked out with his entourage. And I said, oh, Mr. Hopkins, and he shook my hand. He goes, call me Tony. Please call me Tony. And he patted me on the shoulder and he walked away. And they gave us a Thor comic that they had all signed. The entire cast had signed for us. And I still have it. That's the kind of camaraderie and the warmth and friendship. When they talk about how the people in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all those movies, the behind the scenes, everybody gets along and all that, I have firsthand experience, and it was a family.
Wow. That's incredible.
It was great.
And Nyla, can you show that picture again of Ralph and
Simon?
And here's another little thing about you, Ralph.
Yes.
You look better now than you did back then. See, not only are you a survivor, you're also an anti-ager. I mean, there's a few people that still look really good. And I got to admit, Roy, Steranko, as old as they are.
Jr.
Excuse me?
John Romita Jr.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, you guys are.
Hey.
It's all the wine for John Romita. Keeping me young. It's all the wine.
Yeah, but you look great though. You're one of those guys that you still look great. You still look healthy, and you're not like. And the best thing is you haven't been beaten down by the industry. Like you got a positive attitude, and I think that's a lot to do with it and all that.
I want you to know I am very healthy. Look, we have lost, and I'm sure you guys all know this, in the last few years, a lot of people in the industry are gone, and some of them in my age range and younger. Oh. And it hurts every time. Look, my buddy Mark Grunwald gone at 44.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, we worked. I am his daughter's godfather, and that was, in an Italian family, John, as you know, that is quite an honor. And Mark and I couldn't have been closer, and it was such a shock. But I really still love what I do. I am healthy. I continue to play tennis and swim. I was at the swim club today doing my laps. I ski. I eat very healthy. I'm slender, like 125 pounds, and I can't seem to put on any more weight. I take care of myself, and I enjoy living every day. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And I've got a great family, so you can't beat that. I think I'll be around for a while.
And Ralph, this is the other thing I always have to throw at you. Okay, Niall, before you put up the picture, the one I want. I said this to you at Heroes, and I said, you remind me, you look like Burt Ward from 1966.
I remember you saying that.
Niall, show him. You can't tell me.
I was going to put you in the tights, but I figure I'll just do the math.
Yeah, forget the
tights. Wait, Ralph. And the funny thing is, Bert is probably as old as you are now, and he obviously he doesn't look anything like this. You've actually kept like you're looking so good. I told you, you can't tell me I'm not right. Come on.
Yeah, I do have to agree with you on that, John, because I hadn't seen. Well, I do watch Batman when it's on Me TV on Saturday nights, and I said, yeah, John's got a point there. But no, I do enjoy living, and I do have a kind of positive personality about things, so that certainly helps. I don't get glum off it, and that's a good thing. But and looking like Burt Ward is something.
On a sidestep, Ralph, you didn't talk about your family. Well, how was your family? How did your family think that you were getting into this comic world? Did they think there was a future in it, or what did they think about that when you were telling them? When you started telling them?
I'll tell you, my father was someone, being a second generation Italian. He started his own business. He started a business called Macchio Movers, and I worked for them during the summers and all that. And I remember he told me that, he said he wanted me to go into something that he said, I'd like you to become a lawyer or a doctor because, Italian families, you want to brag about your son and all that. Right. And when I went into comics initially, I remember he told me, he goes, I don't know why you're doing this. He goes, I can't tell anybody, anything but that you got a job. Now, my mother, on the other hand, she knew about all the letters that I used to write to comics and all that. Mm. She encouraged me to keep it up. She had a different attitude about that. For my father, working was all about making money and having prestige, That's what was important. But loving what you did, that didn't enter into it.
Right.
That generation, they worked because they needed to work.
Right.
You did because you loved doing it. He didn't start a moving company because he wanted to move furniture for 30 years. He did it because that was an uneducated guy who had ambition, and that was the best way he could start making money. So, but for me, this was something, once I got into it, I said, I love doing this, and I don't care if the pay isn't good or anything like that. I said, this is just what I want to do, and that's why I settled in there. I continue to pursue my graduate work, but then when things started to happen, and comics sort of became something a little bit more prestigious and all that, then the family started to sort of take notice. And today, right. Everybody's going, so what's going on in the with Marvel and all that, and that's, now I'm a celebrity when I get together with the family. Yeah. So a very cool thing now. Yes.
And what did they think that their little Ralph became a celebrity? Because you are a celebrity now. What did they think about that?
As long as I don't get a swelled head, I won't have anybody in the family. I won't have one of my relatives from Staten Island hit me in the head.
There you go.
They'll straighten me out if I ever get a swelled head.
So good. Go ahead now.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch base on, going back, for all my 80s and even early 90s kids, Transformers were big for us. And is it true you wrote the premiere issue for the Transformers comic?
Yes, I did. I believe Bob Budiansky, who later on took the book over, he asked me to do that. Now, that brings up something very interesting, too. At these conventions that I have been at recently, I have been asked to sign more copies of the Transformer than any other comic I worked on. Any other comic I edited or wrote. They cannot get, and even the posters that they made of a bunch of books that I edited, people, if they wanted to buy them, the one that would sell out, the Transformers. There's like a subculture of Transformers people out there. And I said, I only did one issue, and I think I may have done the movie adaptation too. But I know I did that premiere issue, and I got to thank Bob Budiansky for that. It was a lot of work because they wanted all the personalities about those characters, right there in type, and I wasn't that familiar with them. I really didn't play with the toys or anything like that, but I said, I got to learn what's going on here. But yes, that I did do that. And again, that was hands down more than anything I did with Daredevil or Captain America or Spider-Man. More people wanted Transformers comics signed on. How about that?
How did you plot? Now, did you actually plot that whole story, or was the plot given to you?
It's going back a ways. I think I collaborated with Bob Budiansky on that, and I think we knew what Hasbro wanted. So that's how it came together. I mean, I certainly had guidance on that. I didn't just go off on my own. The script and all that was mine, but I certainly was guided along when it came to the actual story itself.
Yeah. Since everyone's bringing them, I might as well bring mine to Terrificon too and have you sign it.
Ralph,
Pleasure.
you're actually in the same category as a Larry Hama and even Howard Chaykin, because despite them doing a lot of other things, Larry Hama is going to live and die by G.I. Joe. I mean, whether he likes it or not, and Howard Chaykin is going to live and die by Star Wars, whether he likes it or not. You know, I mean, it's just unfortunate, but it's such an those, like you said, those subculture, those other categories, that they're such humongous, has so fanfare. Did you I'm sure, did you watch the Transformers movies? What did you think of those?
I did. I went to see the first one that they had put out, I guess it was 8 or 10 years ago. I saw it in the theater. And then I also had the opportunity, I've seen them since they've been on television. I've really, enjoyed watching them on TV. And I think the effects and a lot of the stuff, they're very cool. And also you have the great thing in there, which is the Decepticons, the bad guys, the Omnibots, or whatever they call them. Autobots, I'm sorry. The good guys, and Optimus Prime and the Decepticon. And it's good. It's like what they did with Rom, same thing. You have the Dire Wraiths and you have the Galadorians and all. And you can't go wrong when you have the good guys set up against the bad guys. The stories kind of write themselves right there. So it was, and again, I like to see all that in the movies. And each of these Transformers have their own interesting personalities too. Bumblebee and all the rest of them. It's really cool and it's fun to watch. Another thing that I was asked to when you talk about sort of subcultures, another thing that I was asked to sign quite a bit of at the recent conventions was the Dune adaptation that I did with my buddy Bill Sienkiewicz, which we did years ago when the David Lynch Dune came out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always a huge Dune fan. I continue to buy the Dune books as they come out every once in a while now.
Yeah.
Written by Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son, and his collaborator. And I just love the Dune universe. I can't get enough of it. And I remember when Bob Budiansky was the editor and he asked me to write Dune, I jumped at the chance to do it. So I was very happy about that. And again, I was given, I just signed dozens of those. People seem to, because of course, with the second Dune movie out now, that's a big deal. So,
which I thought were really good. I thought both of them.
I liked them a lot.
Both parts, second part especially, really right on the money. Good stuff.
And I'm not a big sci-fi guy. I'm not a big Star Wars guy, Battlestar, but I really enjoyed those because I didn't care. I was a little young, but the one in the 80s and all that stuff, I was always
Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, it was all right. But this one, I was like, all right, I mean, just with the effects and the worm, I just think
there's such a world that they have, a universe to deal with. I absolutely love it. Something else that we haven't touched on that I was always very, very proud of that I worked on. I was so gratified that Dan Buckley and Joe Quesada wanted me to edit the Stephen King books that we had done.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And the Stand. With the Dark Tower, when Stephen came in for the initial meeting, and we sat down in the room because we were figuring how we were going to do this, and I told him, I said, I've read everything, practically everything Stephen King has written. I said, and he did not want us to do adaptations of the Dark Tower books. He wanted us to kind of expand on the early years of Roland. And I remember he came up with the line when we were in the first meeting with him, and of course we're all in awe. This is Stephen King sitting there in the Marvel offices. And he said, a boy's tests becomes a man's quest. And that kind of defined in one line what we could do with Roland Deschain. And I was very familiar with the mythology at that point of the Dark Tower, those 6 or 7 books. And for a lot of King readers, though, there's sort of an acquired taste. A lot of people devour the King books, but they don't really gravitate towards the Dark Tower stuff. I did, because as he said, the Dark Tower books are his magnum opus. They're the sort of the hub around which many of the other books in his King universe gravitate and circle around. And of course, getting the opportunity to do The Stand, to do the entire novel. And I remember at times, as we were doing it over a period of a year or two, that I would kind of have to fend off attempts by other editors to take the penciler or the inker or the colorist for one issue, and they'd say, well, you're only going to lose him for one issue, just the colorist. We need him for this. And I would fight them and I would pull them back. And I said, you guys got to understand, eventually, this is all going to be collected as one hardcover. And if somebody is reading it and they see this is done and they get to the next chapter and suddenly the inking looks different, it's going to throw them out of the story. I said it's got to be consistent. The same penciler, the same inker, the same colorist all the way through.
Oh.
It managed to do that. So it's a very consistent thing, and I was very proud of it. And so was Stephen. He was very complimentary about what we did with the stand and also with the dog stuff. It was wonderful working with him.
That was mid 2000s, right? Roughly?
Yes, it was. Yes, in the 2000s.
Yeah, mid 2000s.
Now, Ralph, did you ever meet Stan? You have any Stan Lee stories?
Oh, well, certainly Stan would come up to the office, and we would. When I first started, Stan was still in New York.
Yeah,
he still had his big office there.
Right.
And I remember one time he was the whirlwind that everybody says he was. Everybody, he would just kind of wander around the office, and he made you feel good because if I was working in either in the bullpen doing something, he would come in and he'd punch you in the shoulder. How's everything going? And all. He was just ebullient and wonderful to be around. And I remember at one point I was working on trying to do some balloon placements on something, and he saw me doing it. And he says, "Hey, come in here." Brought me into his office, his big office, sat me down on the couch next to him. And I'm sitting there with Stanley kind of over my shoulder next to me, and he's showing me how to do balloon placement. I go, well, this is something for the memoirs. Stanley showing me how to do balloon placement.
Wow.
Also, Stanley and I share the same birthday, December 28th.
Oh.
And when we got to know one another, we would exchange birthday cards. And I have a nice stack of Stan Lee birthday cards, and he would always beat me to the punch. He would always get my card to me before I get my card to him.
Of course.
So he was just a fan. And I also had the opportunity to work with him on a few things. There was a Spider-Man story that Tom DeFalco plotted, Stan scripted, and John Romita Sr. penciled. We did it as kind of a special issue. And then there was a Galactus one shot that John Buscema did as full page illustrations, and Stan scripted that. And I think Tom DeFalco also was involved with the plot, as was John Buscema. And I also had a chance to work with Stan on that too. So working with him, and at the same time knowing him, he was so easy to just know and see. And he also was. He was just a whirlwind, because I remember one time we were on the 10th floor. And we were waiting for the elevator, and he came out with John Sr., and they were going to go out to lunch. Now, we were on the 10th floor, and about a minute into this, Stan looked at his watch, and he goes, "Johnny, we can't wait any longer." And he went to the stairway, and he dragged John Sr. along with him, and they walked down the 10 flights because he couldn't wait the next minute for the elevator to come. And, he flew down those stairs with John in tow.
Poor John.
He would have been happy to wait, but Stan was not happy to wait.
Ralph, I mean, it's funny. You're the golden child, and you have on Stan's birthday. That's incredible. I mean, like once again, you have such a great story, and from such a great perspective. It's like a different angle. It's very interesting. Once again, I know you saying that you can get your story from those other, but your autobiography would be very interesting, though. I mean, you have a great story, and plus, there's not many people that come out of that business that are not well liked by almost everybody. I've never heard a bad word about Ralph Macchio. Never.
Right.
I mean, it's seriously. I mean, everybody else. Somebody somewhere at sometimes they don't like somebody, whatever. But I've never heard that about you. So I mean, you're a really special person. You really are like a golden child. I mean, I think, and it's like it's an honor to absolutely put your story out there, because have you done a lot of podcasts, Ralph?
No, I've done. I think there was one other one that I did a few years back, but no, honestly, I have not. And it's an honor to be with you guys and to be asked to do this. Let me tell you, when really what you say is very flattering, and I do take it all in and all that. But John, you guys work with a real legend, and a real superstar, Roy Thomas. I mean, if there's a guy, when I compare my contributions to the industry to Roy's contributions, it's not even on the same page. So we got to put things in perspective. I appreciate very much what you're saying, and I did all that I could for Marvel through those years. But a real giant is the guy that you guys work for, Roy Thomas. That's the guy.
And Ralph, well, I definitely would like to, hopefully we can get together next time we're at a show together and all that stuff. I'd love to get together and I got Jerry Conway now coming out and about now. He's, I'm taking him now around the tour. The band is getting together like the old boys. So so it would be, great to get you guys together. That's why I was so happy that you could come and see Roy and all that stuff. And I could remember when we saw those original arts of those John Buscema Conans and all that stuff. Yes. That was, it's funny. The lady who had them, she was coming up to him and I said, she goes, oh, I want to show them this. It was you and Roy. And I go, oh yeah, that's really nice. I thought it was like a print. And I go, yeah, that's nice. I said, she goes, no, this is the original art. I go, what? I said, I brought her right up to you guys. I was just like, I just thought it was a girl showing me like a print. And I was like, I brought her right to the front. I was like, you got to show these. So I got some incredible photos of you and Roy holding that they look really well. I would like to send them to you too. It just looks really nice and all that stuff. So anyways, Ralph, thank you so much for being here. Niall, any last words for Mr. Macchio?
No, I just want to thank you again. It's an honor to have you on. I mean, I know you talk about contributions, whose was better, but I mean, your contributions, all your peers, everyone, I mean, what all you guys did deserves just all the accolades. The universes you created, help build. I mean, it's part of our worlds. It really is. It's our escapism. It's what created us and got us into comics and making comics. I mean, you deserve just as much as accolades as Roy, as Tom DeFalco, all these guys. So it's just an honor to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to finally, meeting you in person in a week and a half or so.
Yeah. And Ralph, I definitely want to get you back on, but you helped. Remember this. I mean, there's no escape. You helped change the world. I mean, like, it's on a worldly stage, all these characters. You can actually sit back and be like you really did something magical. You, Roy, Stan, like all that. But you're part of that world that did it. And Niall, Steve,
we're the benefactors.
We benefit, and plus we love to celebrate you guys. I mean, it's something that can never be forgotten. And we're like the children that always knew what these things could be if somebody just did it right. Like obviously with the Hulk in the 70s and stuff, but like when we see Iron Man and like even the X-Men, those were people our age, but getting into the businesses and into those positions that actually could, but you're the guys that kind of fed us all that stuff. So like we're all here because of people like you. And Ralph, like I said, it's such a great thing to celebrate you, because I want more people to know that, because once again, people probably know your work and they know you, but sometimes they don't know they're one the same. So this is a great way for us to celebrate you and do that. And Niall, before we let him go, put up the picture again, because I want everybody to know that this is such it's so true. Ralph, can you tell us anything about were you gonna I know you said you're going to be at Terrificon, but are you going to also be at any? You got any other things going on?
Well, I will be at the New York Comic Convention, because they are they've given me a table. My agent was nice enough to get me a table there, and I said, of course, I can just commute into the city. So I live in northern New Jersey, so I will be there. And I think there's a couple of others that Spencer Beck has got me lined up for. But right now, those are the two: the Terrificon and then the New York.
And Ralph, you did those big books. Didn't you do the big Spider-Man book, those Taschen books?
Yes. In fact,
talk about those. Talk about those.
Okay, I had somebody up at Marvel had suggested that I write the introduction to the first. I mean, this thing could be used as a flotation device in case your house.
Yeah.
This thing is huge. I don't know how they even sell something like this, but apparently they've been selling them. So Taschen Books got in touch with me. And they said, we would like you we're going to do this gigantic book that's going to reprint the first 20 issues of Amazing Spider-Man by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. It's going to be on good paper, and it's going to have everything in there, the covers, the ads, everything. And because I had a relationship with both Stan and Steve Ditko, they said, could you write this intro? And I said, I'd be very happy to. Now, I have to say, that was probably the most difficult intro I did because it was 20,000 words, and it took me about a month to do, 3 hours a night. I had to reread those comics until I knew them in my sleep. I mean, I knew them well anyway, but I really had to know them backwards and forwards. And then I had to sit down and really go to town to write this thing. I also knew that something like this, and I think about this also when I'm writing any of the introductions that I do. You want to be even-handed and fair to everybody. And we both know there are Stan Lee partisans and there are Steve Ditko partisans and there are Jack Kirby partisans. And you err on one side or the other, and all of a sudden it's, hey, what are you saying? Don't you realize his contribution? So I had to be very careful to give as much credit to both men as I could. I thought about that as I was writing it, and I kept rewriting things because I said, I think I moved too far one side or too far to the other. And because I had a number of conversations with Steve Ditko about Spider-Man, something else. I had almost gotten Steve to the point where we were talking, because I worked with him on the Indiana Jones comic. He was the artist on that when I was editing it. And he almost was going to do one more Spider-Man story. I said, look, I can guarantee you can plot it, draw it, and Stan will script it. What he was going to do was he was going to do the story of the summer after Peter Parker had graduated high school. But the last, then he kind of backed out of it at one point. I think he said, no, they're just going to compare me to my previous work. But we talked a lot about Spider-Man and what he wanted to do. And here's a funny thing. At one point, the studio asked me, they said, listen, Ralph, you've got a relationship with him. Talk to Steve Ditko. When the Spider-Man movie is premiering in New York, we would like to bring him in as a guest. Can you pave the way for us? So I called Steve up and I said, Steve, and by the way, Steve Ditko, he answers the phone in the studio by the third ring. That's it. No matter what, hello. So I said, Steve, look, Marvel wants you to show up at this thing. We know that, the problems and the ruffles feathers between you and Stan, but could you, come to the thing? I said, imagine what the media would think if Steve Ditko, the co-creator of Spider-Man, shows up at the premiere. And he was on the other end of the phone. He goes, well, Ralph, imagine what the media will think when halfway through the movie, I get up and walk out and don't come back.
Man.
So he was not, I said, oh, okay, Steve. So that kind of was.
He probably would. Yeah, he probably would. But you want to know something? It doesn't surprise me that it was you that could get him that far. Like whether it be, if there's anybody that could have done it, it would have been the Golden Boy. What do you think, Niall? Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. But though, with the, you were talking about though, like, you've got the Stan guys, you got the Kirby guys, you got the Ditko guys. I kind of want to know your opinion about that now, because you've had such intimate interactions with, I'm not sure what you've had with Kirby, but with Stan and with Ditko.
I honestly, I have to say that even when the principals are still alive, you never really get the true story. It's like, Lennon and McCartney, who did what? It sort of depends on the time of day you talk to people. The only thing I could say is that they're both enormously talented guys. Same thing with Kirby. And you see that the synergy when they work together, as opposed to when they work separately.
Yes.
That's the thing. Whatever that magic is, Lennon and McCartney when they work together, as opposed to separate, when they did singles albums. There's just something about when they work together.
That's my argument.
Yeah,
that's my argument.
Me too.
Yeah. And also, I was awed when I worked with Stan and he showed me balloon placements. Well, I also had a lesson in storytelling from Steve Ditko, one of the great storytellers in comics.
Of course.
Impresarios. Because when we were doing the Indiana Jones comic, Ditko would take the plot, and I believe it was David Michelini who was writing it at the time. He was doing a great job. And he at that time we were still doing Marvel, the plots. We weren't doing full script. And I would give it to Steve. And a week later, he would come back into the office, and he was kind of a friendly guy. There's this rumor that he was kind of a strange guy. I found him friendly and jolly. He'd hang out in the office. He had a great sense of humor, and he would come in and he would sit down next to me, pull up a chair, and on not legal, but on white sheets of notebook paper, he had basically laid out the entire issue like storyboards. And he would sit next to me, and he had pencil marked the plot. Broken it down, because as I said, at that time we were not doing full scripts. We were doing comics. We were doing the Marvel style plots, which means basically you kind of did it pages 1 to 5. Here's what happens, pages 6 to 10, etc. So he would sit next to me, and then he would go, here's what I saw on page 1, and he would show me what was on the script and how he broke it down. And then he saw there was like a transition problem that he saw in the plot, but he solved it, and he'd show me how he did it. And as I'm sitting there, I'm going, I'm getting a lesson in how to tell a story visually, the heart and soul of this business, from one of the great people who's ever been in it.
Yeah.
And this went on every issue. I look forward to him coming in just to show me. And I learned so much about visual storytelling just from him showing me how he broke it down. And they were thumbnails, but they were enlarged and all that. And he'd done it on notebook paper. And he went through the entire issue. And when we got to the end, I said, I've got an education that you couldn't buy anywhere else. It was just, like that. So I was blessed. All I could say is, I'm a partisan of all these guys. Kirby, Big Joe, Stan, all the rest of them. I just think that it was them together. Whatever that energy was when they got together, whether they hated one another or loved one another, somehow when they got together, magic happened that just didn't seem to happen to that extent when they were on their own.
Yeah, that's exactly what I say. Not even like they were. You could say how incredibly talented they were, but together there was just some sort of magic there, and they did not have that when they were on their own. So there had to be something more. So despite what the purists and the obsessed things, all that is baloney. I don't even care. Because they go so far over the edge with some of this stuff, and it's like. There's no denying that together, when Kirby and Stan were together, they made so much magic than when they were apart. And same with Ditko and Stan. So regardless what you think, there was something there that brought something up. And it's funny, whether it was anger, whether it was whatever, or trying to one up the other, sometimes that's the great drive that brings that.
Yeah. Look, there's all that talk about how Lennon and McCartney in those last 3 or 4 years, they didn't get along with one another, and Yoko came in and they didn't, but still the music was there. Mm-hmm. Somehow if you listen to the music, it's still there. And one thing I do have to say also about Stan, in addition to what he brought creatively when he worked with Don Heck or Steve Ditko or Kirby or whoever, he was also unique in that he had a persona that was like a superstar. He was like a Hollywood star before anybody in comics was. You couldn't get that from anyone else in comics. Stan was the guy who could go to colleges. Stan was the guy who could be interviewed by Esquire. Stan was the guy that looked cool when you saw him. He with the hair and the dressing and the beard and the whole thing. He said, he was just showing you, not only if you read Marvel comics are they cool, but Stan Lee was cool. And that was something, and with the MMMS and the way he brought you into the family of Marvel, which they couldn't do over at DC. It was very corporate, good comics, but Stan brought you in as a member of the family. He was Marvel.
And he was generationally cool. And he was old. Yeah. He was old when Marvel started. He
was 25 years already. Yeah.
And yet, generation it's so that's something, and that is something that once again that having that type of energy also brings out something from it pulls out something cosmic or something in the ether from other people. So it just you just wanted to do
passion. It's passion. The guy was truly passionate, and he was a showman. He's the Walt Disney of comics. He was born for it, and he almost lived up to 100 years old doing it.
and then getting to that level of fame during the movies and stuff. I mean, he was at one time, at his most popular. He was one of the most popular faces in the whole world at that time. He was up there with seriously, like you would never think of it, but he was up there like with a Michael Jackson, with an Elvis. He really was. He got that big, and that was all on that persona. It just like there's something magical there that he brought it. And so, like I said, Marvel needed him despite like that. And then he brought everybody up with him. And he was the leader. He was the editor. There's no doubt about that. And his greatest time. Kirby's magic was on the pen, on the paper. So same with Ditko, but not the physical aspect. That's why they and then when Stan Lee walked in the room, they just kind of sunk down, and that probably irritated them too in some way. But that was just Stan. It was just unbelievable.
There was nobody else like him. And, you guys remember there was a show one time on television. Tom Snyder, who used to be an interviewer, he had Julie Schwartz one time. And he had, what's his name, Carmine Infantino and Stan on.
Okay.
And they were talking. Now these two guys also were brilliant men whose contributions were incalculable. Both of them. Yeah. But when they were on with Stan was the guy who was talking about comics as literature and the 20th century mythology and all that. And when they were talking about comics, it was, well, it's something you read on the toilet for 10 minutes and then you're done. But Stan, he was just reaching out to the audience, and you could just see how excited he was about the material. And I was watching it at that time, and I said, these two other guys, they're on a slow track. As brilliant as they were, when it came time to being the showman and to being up front, they just couldn't compete with Stan. Nobody could compete with Stan. No one in the business could compete with him when it came to being that showman. And when people have said that, and sometimes they've said that in a derogatory sense, oh, he was a showman and all that. My response to that was, he had something to show. He wasn't an empty suit. He had something to show. So let him be a showman, because he was promoting something that was brilliant.
It's incredible. Once again, Ralph, and same with you, Ralph. You're the golden child too. Don't forget. Don't ever forget that. But thank you so much, Ralph, for being on. I would love to one day get a picture of you and the Karate Kid together, and like, who's the real Ralph Macchio?
I was in the same position for more than 5 seconds.
Thank you so much for being here. I would definitely want you back. And people out there, when you see him at a convention, you gotta be around Ralph, because he's rub him too, because he's good.
Rub him for good luck.
He's good luck. I'm going off to war. I need you. Thank you so much, Ralph. Now get us out of here.
All right. Thanks again, Ralph. Boom. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP, and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you soon.